So yes, this is the main technology panel. We're going to be talking about data and accountability a little later, but this is the one for the techies. And we've got a fantastic lineup. I think these days IT modernization is the government equivalent of blockchain, maybe, you know, and out there in the public IT sector. It is the buzzword that is going around, but there's some meat behind the buzz. So we're gonna get into that. As we get started, let's let the panel introduce themselves, if you could. Just let everybody know who you are, why you're here, and we'll get right into the discussion. We'll start with you, Gary. We see you around a lot. You're the poster CIO for IT modernization. Why do you keep getting invited places?
Well, I'm Gary Washington. I'm the CIO of the Department of Agriculture. USDA is the CAP goal leader for IT modernization and the President's management agenda. So we are the host, and we're partnering with the Office of American Innovation on the Centers of Excellence to prove the concept that you can modernize across the department.
Excellent. We'll get more into what those centers are doing in a little bit. But next, Danielle, who are you? Why are you here?
Hi, my name is Danielle Metz. I'm with DoD CIO, and I'm detailed to the Office of Science and Technology Policy. And the reason why I was brought over is to help with IT implementation aspects of the IT modernization plan that was finalized and accepted by the President back in December.
And Mark.
So I'm Mark Vaughn. I'm with the Department of Homeland Security, Federal Network Resilience Division. And basically what all that means is we work with federal agencies to really help them understand how to move forward, what modernization really means, and how do you actually do that.
So, as I said, IT modernization can certainly be a buzzword at times. So let's start with the buzz. Let's start at the administration level. When you're talking about the policy, the 10,000-foot view, what is IT modernization for the government these days?
So I think from a strategic level, the way that we set this up was last May, the President, the administration did the Executive Order 13800, and that kind of set the stage in terms of how we would do IT modernization across the federal government, focusing on network consolidation and shared services. It also tasked the American Technology Council to be able to work with DHS, OMB, GSA, and Department of Commerce to put together a plan to figure out how we would jumpstart and do IT modernization for the federal government. So that plan was drafted in cooperation across the federal workspace with industry and the public sector. The draft was done in August, and it was finalized in December. And it articulated 50 action items that the federal government could do to start serving as a catalyst, a primer to jumpstart doing IT modernization. For example, Mark and I work on the TIC modernization pilot. So that was something we know we had the trusted internet connection. That policy was written a decade or so ago when we didn't really have cloud or distributed model. It was really focused on a very network-centric type idea. And we didn't have a way to be able to update rapidly policies and reference architecture to be able to support new or upcoming technology. So that was one of the aspects that we were doing, is try to figure out a way to be able to, with reasonable data, pilot efforts to be able to influence how we would do updates to policies and reference architecture. Another one was focused on doing shared services through enterprise-wide type contracts, like through GSA's EIS contract. Another aspect, which Gary will talk about, is the Centers of Excellence and the work that they're doing in terms of really focusing on the transformation across the board for their IT infrastructure to be able to support to do shared services and improving the ability for the citizens to be able to access this data to be able to do what they need to be able to do. And leveraging that work to be able to translate those lessons learned to be able to be applied across the board to all the different other federal agencies. And then the last piece that this administration has done and working in concert with Congress is Modernizing Government Technology Act. So that had the Technology Modernization Fund, which Margaret spoke about during her keynote speech. So it's a panel of 7. It's chaired by the Fed CIO, Suzette Kent. It's accepting recommendations and proposals from federal agencies that have solid plans. They're able to be executed, and they have a funding mechanism to be able to pay back that loan. So the idea is they would be able to recoup costs by doing these IT modernization implementations and be able to pay back the loan that they're getting from the TMF. The second aspect of the MGT Act was setting up an IT working capital fund. To me, that's the most exciting piece of it because it's pivoting away from appropriated dollars to do IT to setting up something more long-term. And part of the problem that we've seen over previous administrations in terms of, we've always done IT modernization, so this is nothing new or exciting. It's just how we go about doing it that has changed. And so with using IT working capital fund, we're not using end-of-year dollars to do legacy maintenance type things. We're actually able to buy new things to be able to support the updates to the infrastructure that are needed to get to what we currently have in our own houses and homes and private industry.
And as George was mentioning in the last session, it also gets you away from that problem of this year's money, right? Those working capital funds are multi-year funds, so if you are getting an ROI on your new systems, you can actually put that toward something next year. You don't have to race to get that money out the door.
That's absolutely right. So there's always going to have to be a capital investment up front. In order to get a return on investment, you have to have an investment. So, and I think that's part of the problem that people don't really see. They look at the bottom line, they're like, no, that's just too much. We need to be able to save right now. Well, in order to be able to do that, you need to think very strategically long-term. So you have to put up an investment in order to set the stage that you're recouping costs.
So then, Gary, you're where the rubber meets the road on this, right? All those policies coming down from the administration, you and your fellow CIOs are implementing those. And at USDA, you have a particularly interesting link with GSA, as has been mentioned, the Centers of Excellence. For the fistful of people who haven't heard about that yet, quickly, what are the centers? What are you trying to do there?
So the Centers of Excellence is really a partnership between USDA and the Office of American Innovation in the White House, and GSA is supporting that. So the Centers of Excellence are 5 centers. There's a framework for IT modernization and transformation, and it's focused on 5 areas. Those areas being customer experience, infrastructure optimization, cloud adoption, contact centers, and services delivery analytics. So our plan is to put that concept into practice and to modernize the USDA across the department in those 5 areas. And we're doing that in 2 phases. The first phase, which started in March, was around an assessment of USDA in terms of where are we now, what should we look like in the future, and how will we get there with an ROI, cost model, that kind of thing. And the second phase, which will begin in approximately October, is really about the implementation of the ideas that we get from proposal, like future-looking technologies, modernization, automation, robotics, artificial intelligence, those kinds of things. And it's really focused around bringing value to our customers and our citizens, because the Department of Agriculture is in every county in the United States, and we have an international presence as well. So, we want to, we're very focused on reaching out to our farmers, ranchers, foresters, and scientists to ask them what it is that they want, and does this work for them? So it's been a very good partnership. We're taking advantage of the TMF funds as well, and we're providing proposals for citizen-facing opportunities where we can, again, provide value and automate in places where there are very manual processes.
Mm-hmm. So as someone who's going through that TMF board process, any advice for other agencies? We know the board has been saying, send us more proposals. We want to keep this rolling. Do you have any, looks like we have some mic issues, we'll get you going. Do you have any advice for other agencies and offices that want to apply to the board for funding? What have you seen?
I think my advice would be, to be very thoughtful about what it is you're trying to achieve, and when you make this investment. Again, a lot of the activities are really around providing value to the citizens and the customers out there, making their lives better, and the engagement, specifically at USDA, because we're a very public-facing department. We want to make that engagement a positive experience. And the second thing is, I would say to ensure that you and your leadership are very aligned in terms of what your goals are, what you're trying to achieve once you adopt this transformation framework and these centers of excellence, because alignment from the top to the bottom is very key. in terms of achieving these goals.
Excellent. And we're going to talk more about that leadership issue later. But before we move on, I do want to hit one more thing on the centers of excellence. At USDA, modernization isn't new. You all have been innovating and updating your systems for years now, just like many federal agencies.
Right.
So what's different with the centers of excellence? How's that changing how you operate?
I think with the injection of GSA and the centers of excellence, there's this sense of urgency and there's a heightened sense of energy around the modernization process and transformation. And as a department, I think the entire Department of Agriculture has embraced this new change that we're going through. So, it's refreshing. It's not, like you said, it's not new, but the pace has been expedited, and we've set some 3-year goals, and everybody knows what those goals are, so we're working together to achieve them.
And Mark, we brought you here today to talk about one of the things that's close to my heart, which is the cybersecurity aspect of this. So many times in the push for modernization, you want that speed. You want to move forward quickly. How do you make sure that security doesn't get left behind in that scrum?
Well, the important piece of it is that security is an enabler to modernization. And usually when I say that, people are like, no, wait, what are you talking about? This is what's hindering us from actually doing it. When you take a step back and you look at what were your security policies originally intended to do, so you really have to take a step back and you really have to rethink what your policies are and how they're being implemented. And once you take a look at that, you start to realize, well, wait a minute, this is just creating a safe and secure environment for my mission to thrive. This is actually a good thing. This will actually help us achieve our goals quicker, more efficiently, in addition to securely. So I think having the business proposition in mind of what security is actually providing helps out a lot. Too many people really think of security as being the guard at the airport, that you have to take your shoes off and do all that. And cybersecurity is really not like that. So we were actually born out of attacks, true, in that we've had a lot of people, attacking us and getting into our systems and exploiting vulnerabilities and launching from those and exploiting other systems and viruses and malwares and worms. We've gone through that trial by fire, but that's not our focus. And so really just understanding how do you apply security in a slightly new and different way, a more business-minded way, I think helps out a lot. Not going to senior executives and talking about bits and bytes, talking about vulnerabilities and exposures. Really, you have to take the conversation to a C-level when you're speaking with a C-level. How does this support the mission? How does this help the mission thrive? And looking at it in terms of that. Obviously, to directly answer your question, early and often. So security in the design, when you're thinking about doing something, get security involved right away, because there are other ways and other perspectives of doing things, and you may be surprised to discover that the most secure way might happen to be the most efficient way to do it as well. So don't automatically have a mindset that security is there to slow things down.
Excellent. And a little shameless self-plug here. I actually have a story out that went up last night about all that, how they're trying, the folks over at 18F are trying to make an agile ATO process, because the only way to really do true modernization, they say, is to start at the beginning, bake that in right from the start. So, there we go. So, one of the, I talk about it in that story as well, that oftentimes, how are we doing here? Am I hurting everybody? Just whisper. So many times. So often, yeah, I'm just gonna scream a little bit here. So, yeah, I'm just gonna turn it off for a second.
You were slow in the draw.
So, one of the sayings out there is that so often business eats cybersecurity for breakfast, right? That as soon as you have to do something, you might be. I think TIC is a perfect example of this, right? You might be conscious of how you connect until you're at the airport and you just need to get on your phone. You don't have a signal. You connect to the airport Wi-Fi, and there goes all your years of hard work. So, update us, as Danielle mentioned. You've been working on this TIC program, this new pilots, and updating all that. Can you give us an update update on where that's at?
Oh, certainly. So we're currently doing working groups. So the next working group will be on June 18th. That's with agencies. And we've sent those invites out. So definitely those of you who are actually feds and at agencies, definitely encourage you to attend that. We're not just limiting that to agencies, of course. We'll then broaden out once we come out with new reference architectures, use cases, as well as capabilities. We actually will open up to the industry and the public in general, so that way you can provide comments. We definitely want you to provide any questions, comments, or concerns that you have when we do come out with new guidance. Realize, this hasn't been 10 years in the making, so we really want to make sure that we're looking as forward as we can, that we're anticipating the things that you guys already deal with every day, and that we're taking all of that into account as we come out with the future of the TIC program.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to add one thing. So as part of the IT modernization plan, we have 2 ongoing pilot efforts that was selected by DHS, OSTP, USDS, GSA, and OMB. So it's the Small Business Administration and the Census Bureau. So right now they have 2 pilots that we've relaxed some of the rules for the TIC. I'm not saying that we're sacrificing security, but it's agreed upon parameters in terms of for them to be able to test out how they want to be able to implement their shared services, whether it's through software as a service, email collaboration, et cetera. So that information started in March. We should start getting some results later this month. That's what's going to influence how we're going to do the updates to the TIC policy moving forward, and then also help DHS and OMB with the reference architecture for the TIC.
And just everybody in the audience, we've got a little less than 10 minutes left, and I can easily monopolize these people's time because I'm having fun up here. If you have any questions, raise your hand at any point. Jump up and down if I don't see you. We'll make sure that you get a chance to ask them. Danielle, I want to stay with you for a second, though. You mentioned before part of the administration's push is to make sure that these modernization efforts are fruitful, that they actually happen. And part of that is, as I think it was Gary, you mentioned before, really making sure your leadership is on board and understanding that. Recently, there was a new executive order from the White House trying to bolster FITARA and some of these other legislation that is supposed to put the CIO at the table. Can you talk a bit about why that came about and what effect you're seeing?
Well, so it's a great question. So the CIO that came out, or the EO that came out last month was really, in my opinion, empowering the CIOs of the agencies. Now, DoD is not included within that, so we'll set that aside. But for the other federal agencies, it's really bringing the CIO to the C-suite. So with the making sure that from the acquisition perspective, the CIO is involved from an IT, cybersecurity, because oftentimes you would see the CIO was not included, and it was after the fact that something was made. And to Mark's point, you're trying to shoehorn cybersecurity or some IT type things, and it's too late, becomes too costly, and so that's why you get this negative narrative about doing IT modernization or including cybersecurity or any security features when you try to do a COTS product. So from that aspect, I think it's really good. From the workforce perspective, it's also empowering the CIO to have more of a say in terms of the hiring of IT professionals within the agencies. And so you can see all of this kind of being connected together. So over previous administrations, they've been targeting specific things. This one, I think, is very key in terms of making sure that we do have an empowered CIO, because the CIO is critical for us to be able to do a lot of the things that we're trying to achieve, not only with the IT modernization plan, but also the President's management agenda, the IT modernization CAP goal. If we didn't have Gary at USDA, we wouldn't be able to have the leadership that we have to be able to implement a lot of the things that USDA is doing right now, actively doing in partnership with the Centers of Excellence. So I think that's a credit to the fact of having an empowered CIO.
Thank you.
Gary, how much did that executive order help? We had Klinger-Cohen, back in the day. That obviously wasn't enough. We had FITARA. If you go by the scorecards and oversight, that wasn't enough. Does this EO get you where you need to be?
I think it does. I think the EO has helped a great deal. I'm very fortunate because of the secretary that we have at the Department of Agriculture and the leadership team at USDA. They really value information technology, and they want to bring that value, again, to our customers and citizens. We need to do this in a secure manner and that kind of thing. So it just reinforces and strengthens the idea. You know, the CIO at USDA has a seat at the table. I have access to the secretary, that kind of thing, and I'm empowered. The CIO is empowered, you know, to do the job of Chief Information Officer.
We had a question right here. Do we have roving mics? No, I'll give mine up. There we go.
Billy Leiserson, BL Insights. I'd like to ask about two major obstacles to IT modernization and data usage, which are security, which you've talked a little bit about, and also privacy. And in my experience in the agencies often don't want to put their data at risk and share it because they see that they will be held accountable for that, whereas they won't get the benefit or see any benefit from the sharing. So unless you kind of deal with that, I'd like to hear how you propose to overcome those obstacles.
I would say first off, change the obstacles to challenges and really make them a part of, address them early, identify what those challenges are and what the specifics of those challenges are. And as you start to dig deeper, I think you'll start to discover there's a number of processes that already exist out in the, I usually call it the real world, out in the private sector, that can actually address those. One of the biggies is data identification, understanding what data you have and how sensitive it is. That's something we dealt with in the financial sector many, many years ago. Both PCI compliance with credit cards as well as with digital currencies, electronic transfers and things like that. So I think if you really take the opportunity to open just a little bit to say, is this a unique challenge really just for the government, or are there perhaps other sectors that may have tackled this challenge already that may have solutions that we can just use?
And failure, especially I feel like in IT, maybe it's in everything, but it's so important. The number of times I've failed in my life, that's the only time I've ever learned anything, I feel like. And especially when it comes to agencies and their modernization efforts, they're failing at a lot of the same points. They're seeing a lot of the same problems. Gary, as a CIO who has to get hauled in front of Congress sometimes and has to answer to IGs and GAO and all this, when you fail, what's the best way to broadcast that out so others can learn without taking yourself down too many pegs?
Okay.
I just say fail early, fail often.
Right.
Get used to it.
Just be honest about what happened and have a plan to correct it. I know now we try not to dwell too much. Well, you have to understand why it happened. That's pretty obvious. But I think what's just as important or more important is, how you're going to fix it and prevent it from happening again. And that's the tactic we try to take. By no means, is any organization perfect. You're going to have failures, but it's in my opinion, it's how you deal with them.
Excellent. Got time for one more question. Anybody else here in the audience? Back there.
Cyber threat. There are a lot of bad actors. It's more than government across our society. They feel, these bad actors, they can act with little or no consequence. I'd like to throw that back on what you're doing because, it goes back to Willie Sutton, the joke, why rob banks? That's where the money is. Why do they do that? You're seeing increasing success. So if they act with little or no consequence, it's going to get worse.
How are you addressing that? This is another one of those failure issues. Right? How do you show ROI on cybersecurity?
Wow. Okay. How many hours do we have?
You've got 90 seconds.
Yeah. So I'll avoid the ROI piece, just for time.
Okay.
But what I will say with that is absolutely. If you're trying to protect against everything, you'll find very quickly that you don't have the budget to do it. You don't have the personnel, the resources to do it, and you also discover that the nation itself doesn't have enough resources to do that. So what you really have to do is follow the risk process that's out there, understand the RMF, and really understand your mission and try to understand how does your data and how do your IT systems support your mission. And then you can start to really hone in on, well, what's the real threats that I have to worry about for this mission? A perfect example, I knew of a public library once that they had an automated system and they were really worried about it. They had brought in consultants in to really test the application, and the consultants just tore it to bits. I mean, they're like, oh, we can bypass the authentication, we can get to all your data, this, and this. And at the very end of it, the most amazing comment that was made was, it's all public data. We post all this data. So why are we protecting and spending all this money to protect data that we post publicly? And I think that's the same thing, is really understand what data you have, what's sensitive and what's not sensitive, what's of high value, both to attackers as well as your mission. You may find those are different systems. FIPS 199 just tells you what's important to you. It doesn't really tell you what's necessarily important to your adversaries. So look at it from an attacker perspective, what's valuable to them, and focus your attention on those.
And I would just add that, agencies are not alone in this. So DHS and OMB have a program, the High Value Asset Program, where they identify and work with the agencies, just to Mark's point. So we know that we can't go after everything, but we can at least focus in on the high value assets that each agency has. And then with the work that the Centers of Excellence are doing, we'd be able to capitalize on figuring out the right plans in place to be able to figure out the acquisition strategy to get to your execution implementation plan, as well as figuring out what the budget is for you to be able to do that, whether it's if you need to be able to pilot something through a proposal with a TMF, or if you're going out and leveraging GSA's EIS so that you're not going out and independently competing for your own contract. So it's also a shift too, that agencies don't have to individually do things for themselves, that they can work in partnership across the board with the federal government.
Excellent. And very nice job tying all that together for us. You're going to get my job. And also, you heard it from Mark here. He's got a whole diatribe loaded up on ROI, so be sure to add that session here. And, but we are out of time, so we're going to have to let everybody go. If you please join me in thanking our panel.